Phineas and Ferb, 007, Chapter 29, Master of Disguise. The moon was looming over Professor Calico's facility. Professor Calico was watching the TV news and seeing the robot's destruction. Excellent, this is wonderful, Professor Calico replied sinisterly. Suddenly, the elevator opened. Professor Calico turned his head to the left. Who is it? Professor Calico asked, annoyed. It was Phineas and Ferb in disguise as robots. Phineas and Ferb, come on in. I've been expecting you to, Professor Calico replied happily. All the robots have successfully taken over the tri-state area, Phineas replied. Great work, Professor Calico replied sinisterly. But now we need to see the power source to check the energy level, Ferb replied. Oh, okay then, follow me, Professor Calico replied. Phineas and Ferb followed Professor Calico. Professor Calico pulled out a remote and pushed the button. Seconds later, an escalator came from the ceiling. All right, hop on, Professor Calico replied. They hop on the escalator and they began to be lifted up to the ceiling. Minutes later, they reached the roof of Professor Calico's facility. They stepped off the escalator. All right, here we are, Professor Calico replied sinisterly. In the of the roof was the energy reactor. It was a tall, glowing ball of energy. This energy reactor is what is keeping these robots alive, Professor Calico replied sinisterly. What happens if it is destroyed? Phineas asked. It would cause a massive explosion, and then all robots would blow up, Professor Calico replied. Phineas and Ferb looked at each other and nodded their head. Suddenly, Professor Calico was grabbed by 3 grappling hooks, and she was tied up. What the heck are you two doing? You are under my control, Professor Calico asked angrily. Phineas and Ferb and Perry the platypus were standing in front of Professor Calico. It looks like you were caught in a trap, Phineas replied sarcastically. Perry jittered angrily. How did you break free from my control? Professor Calico asked, confused. Perry freed us, then we just pretended to. Under your control, Phineas replied happily. Why, you little no-good brats, Professor Calico replied angrily.